Hello, I'm Jessica Manzi, Redwood City's Transportation Manager. I'd like to briefly introduce you to our preliminary grade separation alternatives. The grade separation feasibility study has three primary goals: to analyze feasible grade separation options, to select a long-term strategy, that is to say, which crossings should be separated when, and to prepare a conceptual level design that can be used to advance a grade separation project to the environmental phase. And just to remind you, a grade separation is when you have a physical separation between railroad tracks and a crossing street. This can be accomplished by raising or lowering the railroad tracks or the crossing streets, or by closing the street altogether at the railroad crossing. We started the grade separation study because we want to increase safety, to connect neighborhoods that are separated by the tracks, to reduce congestion, and to reduce horn noise. Another reason to consider grade separations now is that Caltrain's 2040 service vision will dramatically increase gate downtimes and congestion on local streets. Before the pandemic, we had 92 trains per day. This could go up to as many as 398 per day. During commute times, Caltrain's plan is to go from 10 trains per hour to up to 24. In order for this amount of train activity to work, there needs to be a 4-track transfer station in the middle of the Caltrain corridor. Caltrain's operational analyses have identified that downtown Redwood City is the best place for this hub station. To build a 4-track station that accommodates increased transit service, we need additional width at and approaching the station platforms, and the tracks need to be separated from any crossing streets. When designing this new station, we want to avoid recently constructed development and coordinate as much as possible with redevelopment projects to minimize right-of-way costs and potential impacts. This is a key reason why transit district planning is being done now, to capitalize on the redevelopment of Sequoia Station to get the space needed for a new transit center and grade separations. Incorporating a hub station into our grade separation work makes Redwood City eligible for funding that wouldn't otherwise be available to us. Because while we will benefit from more train service in Redwood City, we'll also be helping improve regional transit service. Improving transportation options also helps meet our climate action goals and makes it easier for people to get to and from Redwood City without a car. As a reminder, the grade separation study is being done together with planning for the transit district, since the transportation improvements need more space and require that the existing CVS and Safeway buildings are moved farther away from the tracks. This slide shows the transit district area in pink. The Sequoia Station property is privately owned, while the Transit Center and Perry Street lots are owned by the Joint Powers Board and the San Mateo County Transit District. As a subset of the transit district, a new mixed-use development has been proposed on the privately owned land next to the transit center. While a lot of our focus is on the downtown and transit district, this map shows that there's development activity along the whole length of the Caltrain corridor in Redwood City. By planning for grade separations now, we will understand what space is needed to build future grade separations and hopefully reduce the overall cost of the project. This slide gives you a high-level overview of the project development process for grade separations. We are currently in the very first stage, where we identify feasible alternatives that can be advanced through the environmental review process, detailed design, and eventually construction. Given the size and complexity of these projects, they typically take 8 to 10 years, assuming that we can identify funding for each step in the process. Our grade separations will likely cost hundreds of millions of dollars. As I mentioned earlier, combining the grade separation work with the creation of a hub station will expand available funding sources and improve our ability to compete for grant funding. Now I'll hand it over to Millette Litzinger to talk about the grade separation alternatives.
Hi, I'm Millette Litzinger with AECOM. I wanted to start with a quick orientation on the rail corridor. In this graphic, north is to the left and south is to the right. On the top is the plan view of the corridor, and below is a profile, which is a section cut along the railroad corridor, so you're looking at it from the side. Within the railroad corridor, there are already 2 grade separations, one at Jefferson, and one at Woodside. The other 6 crossings are at grade, which means the tracks are at the same elevation as the roadway. We also have 3 creeks in the vicinity, Cordilleras Creek to the north, and 2 branch lines of Redwood Creek to the south. The existing station is south of Broadway. The San Carlos city limits is to the north and is represented by the yellow dashed line on the left side of the plan view. We are studying 4 alternatives. One alternative is a citywide elevated track constructed in 1 phase. 2 alternatives are a 2-phased approach to the citywide elevated track. And lastly, an alternative that grade separates Whipple only, which will require the closure of Broadway and Brewster. Alternative 1 would be to elevate the tracks throughout the city as shown with the red line. This would be a high-cost alternative, but would fully grade separate the most at-grade crossings at once. Alternative 2 would be a bit less ambitious than Alternative 1 and would elevate the tracks throughout the city in 2 phases, with Whipple, Brewster, and Broadway in the first phase, shown as the solid red line, and Maple, Main, and Chestnut in the second phase, shown as the red dashed line. In Alternative 2, the Jefferson Avenue rail structure would also be raised in Phase 1. Alternative 3 is very similar to Alternative 2, except that the Jefferson Avenue rail structure would be raised in Phase 2. Alternative 4 would be an elevated track at Whipple only. This is the least complex of the alternatives and has no impacts to the Jefferson Avenue underpass. Let's talk about the horizontal geometry for the railroad tracks. This slide depicts the horizontal alignment of the proposed tracks, with north being to the left and south being to the right. The green line shows the existing track remaining in place. The orange shows the section of track which would be realigned to the west. The blue lines show the transition from 2 tracks to 4 as we near the station. The red lines show the 4 tracks within the station and the blue rectangles that represent the 2 platforms at the station. After the station, the proposed track continues, realigned to the west of the existing track, and returns to its existing alignment just north of Highway 84. Unlike the vertical alignment or profiles we just saw, which vary significantly between alternatives, the horizontal alignment does not differ a lot between alternatives. The horizontal rail alignment for alternatives 2, 3, and 4 is very similar to Alternative 1 shown here with minor variations. For example, the transitions from the green to orange lines will vary by alternative. Alternative 4 shows little to no realignment of the tracks south of Jefferson because the alternative does not grade separate the southern at-grade crossings. Now that you have a high-level overview of the alternatives, we encourage you to go explore the virtual town hall, learn about each alternative and the options at each grade crossing, and look at the evaluation matrix which summarize how each alternative performs against the evaluation criteria. If you have questions, post them in the room or on the project webpage or email us. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to hearing from you.